By the time police found Celeste Rivas Hernandez, David Burke was not hiding in the shadows. He was a rising artist with millions of monthly listeners and a fan base big enough to turn every song, every post, and every video into a public record. And that is what makes this case hit the way it does. Because after Celeste was found, people started pulling that record apart. Piece by piece, they began asking whether the signs had been there the whole time. On September 8th, 2025, workers at a Los Angeles tow yard called police about a Tesla that smelled so bad they knew something was wrong. The car had been impounded after sitting in the Hollywood Hills for days. When officers opened the front storage compartment, they found human remains. The remains were later identified as Celeste Rivas Hernandez, a girl from Lake Elsinore who had been missing since 2024. The Tesla was registered to David Anthony Burke, the singer known as D4VD. And while police were starting to understand what they had found, Burke was still on tour. That detail has stayed with people. A child had been missing for more than a year. Her remains had just been pulled from a car connected to a young star whose career was still climbing. And he was still moving through the world like the ground had not shifted under him yet. This story is not hard to follow. It is hard to accept. It starts with a teenager from Southern California, a singer with a massive online following and a connection that should have set off alarms much sooner than it did. David Anthony Burke built his name online. Before the headlines turned dark, he was known for music that came out of internet culture and grew fast because of it.
He didn't do it. He didn't do it.
Yo, Chicago, I need everybody to get your lights out one more time. Let's get the flashlights out. Let's light it up again. Let's do it.
Chicago.
But my head is all in a fire. And I see other things. What if they're all lies? It doesn't matter what you say. Can't make these feelings go away. Tell me, is this routine?
He was young, marketable, and easy to describe as one of those artists who seemed to appear out of nowhere. A viral song changed everything, and the industry moved quickly behind him. He signed with a major label, his audience exploded, and the gap between underground internet artist and mainstream act kept shrinking. That rise matters because it shaped how people saw him. He was not some older suspect living a private life. He was visible. He was current. He was building a career in public, and every success helped make him look less like someone people should worry about. Celeste Rivas Hernandez came from Lake Elsinore, southeast of Los Angeles. Public reporting on her life is limited, but the pieces that are there say enough. Family and community members described her as sweet, quiet, smart, and hardworking. She was a child with school, relatives, routines, and people who loved her. That should stay at the center of the story because cases like this can get swallowed by internet obsession and celebrity fallout. The person lost in all of that is usually the victim. In Celeste's case, the victim was a girl whose family spent months trying to bring her home. According to current reporting, Celeste had run away before and later returned. Then she disappeared again. On April 5th, 2024, her family made what became the final missing person report. For them, that was the beginning of a nightmare. For the public, it was just another local missing child case that had not broken through yet. And that is often how these stories start. Not with national attention, not with TV trucks, just with family members trying to get someone to listen before the worst happens. At some point before the case exploded, Celeste crossed paths with David Burke. That connection is now one of the most important parts of the timeline. Her brother later said family members knew Celeste knew Burke, and that when she disappeared, she had gone to see a movie with him and never came back. That does not answer every question in this case, but it changes the shape of it immediately. Because once that detail entered the public record, this was no longer just a mystery about where a missing girl had gone. It became a story about who had access to her, who family members were already worried about, and why those concerns were not enough to stop what came next. After Celeste vanished, Burke's life did not stall. It kept moving. That is one of the hardest parts of the story to sit with. While her family was living with uncertainty, he was still building momentum. He released music. He stayed in the public eye. He kept growing his career. In April 2025, he released his debut album, and by late summer, he was touring. On paper, it looked like one of the biggest years of his life. And then the Tesla was opened. But before that discovery, a different narrative had already started building online. People who knew of Burke, or said they knew something about the circles around him, had been trading stories, screenshots, clips, and accusations for months. Some of that material was serious, some of it was impossible to verify. Some of it came from social media users, former friends, people on Discord, and people who said they had seen Celeste around him before the public knew how bad this case would get. That is where this story becomes difficult to tell cleanly, because there are two versions moving at once. There is the official case the police built, and there is the larger internet trail people now point to when they say the warning signs were already out there. The official case is the part that matters most. That is what leads to warrants, subpoenas, grand jury testimony, and an arrest. But the online trail matters too, because it helps explain why so many people felt sick when the car was linked to Burke. For them, the connection did not feel random. It felt like a door finally opening on something they had feared was already happening. By late 2025, news coverage was making clear that investigators believed this was not an accident, not a disappearance that ended in a tragic natural death, and not a case that could be explained away by rumor. The LAPD was working it as a homicide investigation. The medical examiner's file was locked down under an unusual court-ordered security hold. The cause of death was not being released. And even with all that secrecy, the case was tightening. People noticed something else too. The public did not hear much from Burke after Celeste's remains were identified. Tour dates started falling away. The image of a fast-rising singer with the world opening up in front of him was suddenly sitting next to a homicide investigation involving a missing girl. That contrast is part of what made the case spread so widely. Fame changes how people look at a crime. It should not, but it does. A missing child case that might have stayed local now had the full force of internet attention on it. Every old clip was being replayed. Every rumor was being reposted. Every silence started sounding loud. Then, in November 2025, reporting showed the investigation had moved closer to Burke himself. He was not just a man whose car had become part of a terrible discovery. Investigators were focusing on him. By February 2026, unsealed records from a grand jury fight in Texas described Burke as the target of a murder investigation. Prosecutors were trying to compel testimony from his mother, father, and brother. That step did not happen by accident. It meant the case had developed far enough that investigators were no longer circling the edges. They were going directly at the family. A missing girl from Lake Elsinore. A singer whose life kept getting bigger while the case around him grew darker. A family that says they already knew there was a connection. A car abandoned in the Hollywood Hills. A sealed investigation, a grand jury naming its target, and a feeling by then that the arrest was not a question of if, but when. The public first learned the broad outline in pieces. A Tesla had been sitting in the Hollywood Hills long enough to draw attention. Some reports said it had been parked there for days before it was towed. By the time it reached the impound lot, workers noticed the smell almost immediately. That was what brought police in. Inside the front storage compartment, officers found a cadaver bag with insects and a strong odor of decay. Under that, they found more remains. The body was badly decomposed. Heat had done its work. Time had done the rest. The victim was eventually identified as Celeste Rivas Hernandez. That moment changed everything. Now the police were not dealing with unknown remains. They were dealing with a missing child whose family had spent more than a year waiting, hoping, and likely fearing the answer they had now been given. And the answer had come in a car tied to a young artist with a national following. There is a reason this case hit people so hard. It was not just the discovery itself. It was the image of where she was found. A young girl, reduced to remains, hidden inside the front compartment of an abandoned Tesla in Los Angeles heat. That image does not leave people easily, and from that point on, every question led back to David Burke. Investigators moved carefully, but the direction of the case became clearer over time. The car was registered to Burke at his family's Texas address. It had not been reported stolen. That mattered immediately. So did the fact that police soon searched his residence in Los Angeles. While authorities were quiet in public, the steps behind the scenes were getting more serious. Then came one of the strangest features of the whole case, the seal around the medical examiner's findings. In most high-profile cases, the public eventually learns the cause of death, even if not right away. Here, the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner said LAPD had asked for a security hold, and a court order blocked the release of autopsy and related records. The medical examiner even said the situation was highly unusual. That meant the public could see the outline of the case, but not the forensic core. People knew Celeste had been found. They knew where she had been found. They knew the car connected to Burke, but they did not know exactly what the examination showed. That kind of secrecy does two things at once. It protects the investigation and it drives speculation into overdrive. So while authorities stayed quiet, the internet filled in the silence with everything from reasonable questions to wild theories. Some people focused on old clips, online posts, and music videos. Some insisted the material showed obsession, control, or warning signs. Some tried to build entire explanations out of social media fragments. But the real case was still being built the slow way, through warrants, records, forensic review, interviews, and grand jury work. That is important because internet suspicion is not evidence. It can point in a direction, but it is not what puts handcuffs on someone. By November 2025, reporting showed that police were treating the case as a murder investigation, with Burke at the center of it. Around the same time, prosecutors started presenting evidence to a secret investigative grand jury. That development pushed the story into a more serious phase. A grand jury is not gossip. It is not rumor. It means prosecutors believed there was enough there to keep building toward criminal action. Then, in February 2026, the public got its clearest look yet at how far the case had come. Unsealed court records from Texas showed that prosecutors were trying to force Burke's parents and brother to testify. The filings described Burke as the target of the grand jury investigation and said he may have committed one count of murder. That was a major shift. Until then, police had been cautious in how they spoke publicly. The car was connected to him. His home had been searched. The investigation was active. But the February records named the real direction of the case in plain language. This was not just about finding out how Celeste died. Investigators were working toward the question of whether David Burke murdered her. There was another layer to all of this that made the case even more difficult for Celeste's family. Her brother said he had already gone to police before, trying to tell them about Burke and Celeste, and that nothing came of it because there was not enough evidence. If that is true, it becomes one of the most painful details in the entire timeline, because it means this family did not simply learn too late that she was connected to him. It means they tried to push that concern toward law enforcement before the case ended in a body recovery. You can feel the weight of that in every later update. As 2026 began, the public still had no arrest, no filed murder complaint, and no autopsy report. Just a dead girl, a sealed case, a singer under growing scrutiny, and court records that now identified him as the target. At that point, the investigation had gone beyond suspicion. It was closing in. The arrest did not happen in the emotional heat of the discovery. It came months later after the police had time to sit with the evidence, bring in prosecutors, secure the grand jury process, and test the case before making their move. And when that move finally came, it confirmed what many people had already started to believe. David Burke was no longer just connected to the case. He was the man LAPD was taking into custody for it. On April 16, 2026, LAPD arrested David Anthony Burke in the Hollywood Hills on suspicion of murdering Celeste Rivas Hernandez.
Fallout continues for platinum-selling singer David, now in police custody, arrested yesterday by the LAPD in connection with a gruesome murder of a 14-year-old girl who went missing in 2024.
David's music label, Interscope Records, is already distancing themselves from the controversy. KTLA's Lindsay Pena is live in the Hollywood Hills, where the singer was arrested. Lindsay.
Yeah, Cher, Micah, the house where David was staying right before his arrest, relatively quiet today, and we're still not sure who might be inside. What we do know is that David is in custody, being held without bail until at least Monday. Singer David's arrest late Thursday afternoon captured by TMZ, the 21-year-old taken into custody at a home in the Hollywood Hills. The California Post also releasing this footage showing officers in tactical gear handcuffing David before putting him inside a patrol vehicle. The musician, whose full name is David Burke, has been on LAPD's radar as a suspect for months in the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas, whose decomposing body was found in the trunk of David's Tesla last September. Although an investigative grand jury was convened in the case late last year, it never returned an indictment. At this point, it's unclear what finally prompted his arrest on suspicion of murder. KTLA legal analyst Allison Treasel.
Just because he's been arrested on suspicion of murder does not mean that on Monday he will be charged with murder. It means that he will either be brought to court and the district attorney will file charges at that point, or he will be released.
Rivas went missing from her Lake Elsinore home back in 2024. She allegedly met David on social media and, according to law enforcement sources, was in a romantic relationship with him. Treasel says what is clear is that investigators have spent months building their case, and Monday may be when we find out more about what evidence they have against David.
Including what type of forensic, digital, witness, information, all of that should become more available to the public on Monday.
David's defense team releasing a statement maintaining their client is innocent, saying the singer hasn't been charged with any crime. Quote, the actual evidence in this case will show that David Burke did not murder Celeste Rivas Hernandez, and he was not the cause of her death. Despite no official charges being filed yet, David's label Interscope already wiping his page off their site. Now, an attorney for Celeste Rivas' family telling us they plan to speak briefly on Monday after the DA makes their announcement. They issued a statement saying in part, quote, the family remembers Celeste as a daughter and sister whose loss has deeply affected those who knew and loved her. In learning of Burke's arrest, Celeste's father, Jesus Rivas, said, quote, thank God, justice for Celeste. We're reporting live from the Hollywood Hills. Lindsay Pena, KTLA 5 News.
The arrest happened months after her remains were found and months after investigators began tightening the case around him. He was booked that night and held without bail. That was the moment the public story changed for a second time. The first major shift came when Celeste was found. The second came when police made clear they believed the case led back to the man whose music career had been rising while her family was still searching for answers. As of the last 24 hours, singer D4VD, whose legal name is David Burke, pleaded not guilty in Los Angeles Superior Court to first-degree murder and several related charges in the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. He is also facing charges tied to alleged sexual abuse of a minor and mutilation of a corpse, and prosecutors say they have not yet decided whether to seek the death penalty.
The DA's office announced the charges about an hour ago, and David is now expected in court this afternoon.
Eyewitness News reporter Tim Caputo joins us now live in downtown LA with what we've been learning this morning. Tim.
Philip, Colleen, it is a whole bunch of new information, including the what, when, where, and why in this case. The DA's office, literally as we speak, filing those first-degree murder charges against the singer known as David, real name David Burke, who faces the possibility, if convicted, of a life behind prison or even the death penalty if the DA chooses to do so. They revealed new information, including the fact that they claim this 14-year-old victim, Celeste Rivas Hernandez, was invited over to a home that Burke had been renting in the Hollywood Hills last spring. They say that's where he killed her. This was because they claim the sexual relationship that he was having with this girl when she was only 13 and 14 years old as an effort to cover up their relationship to preserve his budding music career.
These charges include the most serious charges that a DA's office can bring. That is first-degree murder with special circumstances.
We now know investigators believe the 14-year-old was killed on April 23rd of last year, 5 months before her body was found in the trunk of a Tesla parked in the Hollywood Hills, not far from a house that Burke was renting, which is the location detectives believe that murder took place. This investigation obviously has taken a long time, 7 months, but today the DA says they believe they have their man. Part of the reason it may have taken so long, Rivas's body was dismembered and it was badly decomposed. Her remains only discovered 4.5 months after she was killed, according to the DA. District Attorney Nathan Hochman said investigators have physical, forensic, and digital evidence that ties the 21-year-old singer to her death, and this first-degree murder charge includes special circumstances that make David eligible for the death penalty.
Back to this being a parent's nightmare. On April 23, 2025, as been alleged by the complaint, Celeste, a 14-year-old at that time, went to Mr. Burke's house in the Hollywood Hills. She was never heard from again. This murder was committed for financial gain. As the evidence will show in court, the financial gain was for Mr. Burke to maintain his very lucrative musical career that Celeste was threatening on that particular night.
Attorneys representing David Burke said they intend to, quote, vigorously defend David's innocent, end quote. And that defense will start later this afternoon. As I mentioned, the DA's office literally was filing the charges after that press conference at about 10:30 this morning. David is expected in court for his arraignment 1:30 or maybe a little bit after that this afternoon. Also today at the press conference, likely in the courtroom and certainly after the courtroom, we have seen Rivas's family here. She spoke with the DA and Chief of Police. They have not spoken publicly about this case literally at any point. We are expected to hear from them after the arraignment a little bit later this afternoon, the first time we will hear from them since their daughter's death. We're live this morning in downtown Los Angeles. Tim Caputo, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
According to reporting on the arraignment, prosecutors allege Burke killed Celeste to stop her from exposing their relationship and damaging his career. His lawyers denied the allegations, asked for a preliminary hearing, and Burke is being held without bail while the case moves forward. Part of the reason this story spread so quickly is obvious. The victim was a girl. The man arrested was famous. The discovery was horrifying. Cases like that move fast online, but there was something else. This case tapped into a very old fear in a very modern form. A young person disappears, and the person who ends up at the center of the story is not some faceless stranger. He is someone with reach, someone who knows how to shape an image, someone who can move through fan spaces, internet culture, and public attention while a private reality stays hidden. That is why so many people reacted so strongly to the arrest. It felt like the collision of two worlds that should never have met. The world of a missing child and the world of online celebrity. And when those worlds collided, the result was brutal. The most important thing in this story is not David Burke's career. It is not his image, his audience, or the way the internet reacted to him. It is Celeste. Celeste Rivas Hernandez was a girl whose family wanted her back. That is the plain truth underneath every headline in this case. Before the tow yard, before the sealed records, before the arrest, there was a family waiting for their child to come home. There are still major gaps in the public record. The autopsy findings are not fully public. The exact cause of death has not been laid out in open court. The prosecution theory has not yet been tested at trial. Those missing pieces matter. But one fact is no longer missing. Celeste is not a runaway poster now. She is not a name in an open search. She is a child at the center of a homicide case. A girl was gone. Her family tried to find her, and now the justice system has to answer for what happened next. Make sure you subscribe to Crime in Cold Light if you want to see more real-life stories like this, cases that show what really happens when love turns deadly. Drop a like if this video made you stop and think, leave a comment to share your thoughts, and share this with your people so they can stay aware too. We're telling these stories to remember the victims, to keep their voices alive, and to make sure the lessons don't get lost.